When I was 8 years old, I was sleeping over at my aunt's house in Southern California. During my sleep, I suddenly woke up and saw a faint blue light at my bedside. Surprisingly, I wasn't scared. I was actually pretty calm, all things considered. The light moved towards the hallway. The whole house was pitch black, and I needed to follow it. The light stopped moving near the couch in the living room. It stayed there for about 5 seconds and then faded away. I sat down on the couch trying to process what I just saw, and I guess I eventually fell asleep there. I woke up a few hours later to some commotion coming in from the area of the guest room. My aunt yelling, asking my uncle where I was. I ran in and saw a large armoire at the foot of the bed, which had fallen directly onto the bed where I had been sleeping before. The thing was old and top-heavy. It probably weighed about 200 pounds or more. My aunt was so relieved to see me. She explained an earthquake shook the house, not unheard of in California. I'm a heavy sleeper and didn't feel anything. I had just woken up by the yelling and scrambling around by my aunt and uncle. I don't know if I dreamt this and wound up on the couch because I was sleepwalking. I've never slept-walked before or since, so that wasn't a normal occurrence. To this day, I don't know if this actually happened or why I even followed the light, because adult me would be scared as hell if this happened right now.
A few years ago, I witnessed multiple demonic manifestations and exorcisms. I was 21 years old at a young adult Christian conference. At the time, I had recently made a conscious decision to be a follower of Jesus. As you can imagine, I was still skeptical and hesitant surrounding the supernatural. However, I can't deny that what I experienced that night was real. I was attending the conference with my best friend, who I literally just picked up after being released from the mental hospital after a series of suicide attempts. I remember praying and praying for my friend that she would be relieved, healed of her suicidal thoughts. I couldn't bear watching her sabotage herself anymore and felt hopeless. The conference was powerful and refreshing, but on the last night, during the last session, the preacher abruptly stopped his message. He said, "I can't shake this deep feeling that there is a spirit of suicide in this room. I know this is hard, but if that's you, come up to the altar and receive prayer." My heart sunk into my stomach. God heard me. My friend, who is painfully shy, without hesitation, made her way to the altar along with hundreds of people. I followed behind her to support her. This is where it gets crazy. Once I made my way to the front, I felt the air get heavy and time slowed down as if I stepped into another world. Call it adrenaline. Call it overstimulation. It was supernatural. In a matter of minutes, my friend begins weeping and falls on the floor. She was sound asleep, and I had no clue what to do. Then out of nowhere, 6 young women throughout the room start to manifest. Yep. They were convulsing on the floor. They were growling and speaking in deep voices. The one closest to me was ripping her face with her nails. A church leader shouted at me to grab her hands and prevent her from ripping her face. It took 5 people to hold this girl down, who was probably no more than 17. 18. To be honest, I totally forgot about my friend, who was still lying on the floor no more than a few feet away from me. We prayed and demanded the spirit leave for about an hour. It was utterly exhausting. At one point, I looked up and felt like angels were circling the room, protecting them. The room was so dense and saturated by the spirit, unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was absolutely insane. Then, out of nowhere, the girl's body relaxed. Her arms fell to her side and she was released. All 6 girls, spread throughout the congregation, one by one, were released and set free. I had never felt so drained. My friend, however, woke up and had no idea what happened. To this day, she hasn't had another suicide attempt. After our pastors followed up with the girls, it turned out all 6 of them were from the same youth group and had experienced similar abuse. Lastly, after regrouping a few weeks later, another close friend told me she saw angels circling the room. I thought I was crazy.
When I was a teenager, I tried to kill myself. I took a heap of my mom's sleeping pills and whatever I could find around the house and washed it down with some booze. I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, I started feeling sleepy, and as I closed my eyes and started to doze, God spoke to me. He told me I wasn't ready to die and I had a greater purpose to fulfill. I remember feeling like I was moving really fast, like traveling in a car with the windows down. And then I opened my eyes and was very awake. I called my mom, and as soon as I finished telling her what happened, I started vomiting and passed out. I was taken to the hospital, but obviously I was okay. After that, I started reading the Bible and attending church. One time during prayer, I spoke in tongues. I reasoned with myself it was a panic attack, but it wasn't. It was a complete loss of control and an experience like no other. I don't live by the Bible in any way. I don't attend service, and I think I've broken most of the commandments a dozen times. I try to follow love thy neighbor to the best of my ability. Religion has made me into a nicer and empathetic person who just wants to try and do good because it makes me feel good. Still not 100% sure what that purpose is, although that's what has kept me here on Earth. Not sure if this counts as supernatural, but here it goes. The summer after I graduated high school, I got a job delivering pizza to help save money for college. I had a lot of run-ins with some pretty weird characters, but nothing like what happened this one night. It was a Friday night. We deliver pizzas until 3 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. It was 2:45 a.m. and we were preparing to close when our manager said we got a call for a delivery at a place almost 20 minutes away. Being the desperate-for-money teenager I was, I offered to do the delivery. This was before smartphones had GPS, so I used a Garmin. I plugged in the address and off I went. The Garmin took me deep into the backwoods of rural Texas. I finally arrived at my destination. The house looked like something in a horror movie. Big wooden 2-story house with no lights on. The first thing I noticed about the house was that the front door was wide open. I sat in my car for a few minutes debating on turning back and claiming no one was home. Something just didn't feel right. I needed the tip money, so I sucked it up and approached the house. When I got to the open front door, I didn't enter. Instead, I knocked. No one answered. I knocked again as loud as I could. No response. I finally got the courage to say something. "Pizza delivery. Anyone home?" There was a few seconds of silence until I heard a weird voice. "Upstairs?" I walked into the house and could barely make out my surroundings because it was so dark. I make it to the bottom of the stairs and look up into the dark abyss. Again I said, "Pizza delivery." The voice spoke again. "Come upstairs. I can't get out of bed." Something was very off about this voice. It didn't sound normal. The best I can describe it is if a dog somehow learned to talk but still had trouble pronouncing human words. The hair stood up on my neck. There was no way I was going up there. The tip wasn't worth it. I placed the pizza at the bottom of the stairs and shouted, "I'm leaving it here at the bottom of the stairs. Have a good night." As I turned away, the voice said, "No, come upstairs. I can't get out of bed." I replied, "I'm sorry, I'm not even allowed to enter someone's home on the job. You'll have to come get it." I heard some loud banging from upstairs with the voice shouting at full volume, "Come upstairs, I can't come out of bed." The voice shouted this over and over again like it was a recording on a loop. The banging got louder and louder as the voice got louder. I got the hell out of there at full speed. To this day, I have no idea what the heck happened in that house. This was in Spring, Texas.
My BFF and I used to work at McDonald's when we were teens. She lived with me at the time in an apartment right across the street. One morning we both went to work and she started complaining about having cramps. This wasn't unusual for her. Every month she had a pretty rough few days for obvious reasons. Then things were back to normal. Our boss let her off and she walked back across the street to lie down. A couple of hours later, I got the most overwhelming feeling that I should go check on her. Completely unexplainable, and it got so bad I couldn't concentrate on work or anything else. I asked my boss to go and he got pissed off at me, but when I told him either he let me go briefly or I would quit, he gave me 10 minutes. I rushed back across the street, opened the apartment, and called her name, but all I could hear was the bath running. I knocked on the door, and when she didn't answer, I opened it to find her passed out in the bathtub. The water was running and close to overflowing. I shut the water off, drained it, and had to leave her in the tub because I couldn't get her out. This was in the 90s, and no one had cell phones yet. We didn't have a phone in the apartment either, so I left the apartment and ran half a mile down the road to my mom's work so she could get an ambulance out to the apartment. Turned out, she had appendicitis, and the doctors said if she hadn't gotten to the hospital right then, she probably would have died. Her appendix ruptured as soon as they opened her up, and she was in the hospital for a long time. Neither one of us could explain it, but every so often, I say something along the lines of, "Hey, remember when I saved your life? You can never, ever be mean to me." 20 plus years later, we're still best friends.